Hello. Hello. All right. No, these are not hooked up. We had somebody that decided to paint one of these things with Diet Coke and shorted out the whole system. All right. Would like to welcome everybody to meeting of the Reapportionment Redistricting Committee meeting for the purpose of adopting redistricting guidelines. I would like for Secretary Senator Bethel to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thought we had hand. Anyway, just speak loudly enough.
That's fine. Senator Seabaugh, Senator Cowser, I mark myself present, Mr. Chairman. Senator Balfour, Senator Chance, Senator Ford, Senator Harbison, Senator Henson, here. Senator Judson, here. Senator Jackson, here. Senator Rogers, here. Senator Schaefer, Senator Statham, here. Senator Tate, here. Senator Collison, here. President Pro Tem.
We do not have a vacancy anymore. We'd like to welcome Senator Horaceina Tate as a member of the committee. Welcome. The Committee on Assignments officially made that appointment this morning, so we'd like to welcome her to the committee and appreciate the value you'll bring to the work that we're going to do. So we do have a quorum. All right. With that, we are going to start the process of having this meeting. I sent out to everyone on the committee, and I will say that Senator Tate was not a member of the committee, so she didn't get it because she wasn't a member of the committee. And so, but hopefully you've had the opportunity to get the proposal guidelines. Last week we announced that we were having this committee meeting for this purpose of adopting the guidelines. With that, I asked every member of the committee if they had any suggestions to forward them to my office. We did receive some suggestions, and then worked on Monday to put together a proposal, sent those proposals out to the members of the committee yesterday, more than 24 hours in advance of this meeting. For those of individuals, just for historical knowledge, historically, it was those principles, if any principles were adopted well into when we were already into session. Not this early in the process. And how they were adopted is you showed up to a committee meeting, you opened your folder, and it was either in your folder or was passed out at the chairman at that time for that purpose. So these have been out to the members of this committee for them to have consideration. I will say that I was very pleased that the minority leader and I did have a discussion about that, and he and I have already talked about some other issues. We'll see if those will be part of the discussion or not. So we've had a good process in working in that. With that, for those of you who wish to make any comments to the committee, there is a sign-up sheet outside that door there. So if you will go and sign up if you wish to make any comments, we will do that first of all before the dialogue between the committee members begin. I know that the House is holding their committee meeting at the same time. I will inform you that we worked in conjunction with the House to adopt one list of principles. That way we felt like that would be less confusing for the public, that we would utilize the same principles. So the same principles being discussed here will be the same principles discussed over in the Coverdale legislative office building, room 606. So if you want to make your comments here and want to go there, it's in 606. If anybody has any questions about where that is at, just ask somebody. Somebody will help direct you that, so we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to attend that. We have been working on the process of what is called redistricting, and again, it is not a process that we choose to do. The Constitution requires us to take a census every 10 years, and thus requires us to redraw the lines so that the individuals of the citizens of Georgia have equal representation, and that being each Senate district and House district being represented equally with equal population. So this is a process that we have to undergo. In doing that, we received census data in April, and then received further data that we needed to be able to draw these maps. We started a series of public hearings throughout the state. We had 12 hearings throughout the state, so the public would have an opportunity to come and tell us what they felt like was important for us to take into consideration in drawing these maps. I also have made myself available to every member of the Senate to sit down and to hear what they had to say, what they felt like was important. And for the general public, I'm proud to tell you that almost 50 members of the Senate have engaged in conversation in this process. So I'm very encouraged that we have individuals that are coming and talking about what they believe to be an important thing that we have to deal with. The input session is not closed. So those who want to make continuing comments, you can go on the website and continue to make comments via email. That website, for anybody that's concerned or would like to know, is www.legis.ga.gov. You can go in there and you can continue to make comments. I will say that for those of you who are representing organizations and know you have people that want to make comments, we are quickly approaching when we will come into special session and when we'll have to ultimately pass a map. So the time for those comments is drawing very closely to an end. In respect with that, the next thing we want to do is what we're here for today's purpose is adopting guidelines in how we will go about in putting the pieces together and how we will ultimately come up with a plan that we will put on the Senate floor for a vote of the members of the Senate. So with that, we'll start with that. We do have some individuals who have wished to come and to speak. I will say that I'm sure that we'll have individuals coming from the other meeting over here. We want to give everybody an ample time to make their comments. I would ask that you please keep your comments very terse, very short. You can be thorough with that. So we ask that you keep time as part of your consideration, because there may be other individuals that wish to speak. With that, William Perry. And we have, I'm sorry for all the different microphones that we have this wireless, if you could please speak to that. Again, when you come to speak, as we did in all the public hearings, if you would please give us your name and where you are from, so that we do have, these are being recorded, so that if there is any member of this committee or anybody else that wishes to get in touch with you, they have some way of being able to identify you and where you're from in doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is William Perry from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Executive Director of Common Cause Georgia and representing the Georgia Redistricting Alliance, which includes Common Cause Georgia, the League of Women Voters, and Georgia WAND. We wanted to present to you today and have passed out a memo from our group, and we're doing the same thing on the House side, requesting that you also consider the 5 principles that we've come up with for the maps that we plan to draw and present to you. They are standards that we feel are fair and equitable in the redistricting process and have been put together with much research. The 5 principles, and I'll put myself in front of the firing line now to say that.
Excuse me, did you say that you brought a copy of that for us to pass out?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, so they're
Gerald,
coming.
is that
coming around now?
Please make sure that member gets a copy of that. Go ahead. I thought you said you brought a copy, and I
That's fine.
Get
Absolutely.
a copy to all the members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to say we're glad to have you all back in Atlanta. It gets awfully lonely when y'all aren't here, and we're glad that these meetings are beginning, and want to recognize the courage of the chairman and the secretary to color coordinate today, because I was really impressed with how y'all came out looking so good today. So I'll butter you up with that and then talk about our first principle, being that no plan or district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. We feel it's important to draw the lines about the people and the community of interest as opposed to the members that represent the area currently. Also feel that districts shall be drawn with the intent or result of denying or abridging the equal opportunity of minorities. Districts shall consist of contiguous territory, and to the extent feasible, districts shall be pursuant to the principle of one person, one vote. Districts shall be as equal in population as possible. And the 5th and final, where feasible, apportionment plans should make use of existing city, county, and geographical boundaries and other similar communities of interest. We've had the opportunity to have a representative at all 12 of the public hearings, and appreciate and watch those with great interest, and hope you certainly will consider our comments along with those that you received from across the state. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Jerry Gonzalez.
Mr. Gonzalez is at the House hearing while everything else is
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Secretary of the committee, because we had another committee member to show up. I'd like to record his attendance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just take note that Senator Cowser is with us.
Do we have anybody else signed up to make any comments? Nobody else wishes to make any comments? Well, we'll do as we did with the public hearing. We're going to let the public have an opportunity to make comments, and then we'll engage in our discussions. So with that, we're going to take let's take about a 12-minute break. We'll reconvene at 2:30. We'll start back promptly at 2:30.
Keep my eyes on what y'all doing. We have it tight. We don't let anything come between us now. Don't let anything come between us. We haven't seen it last
Everything's going good.
So hit you with a gospel. Brother Bill, I think going home. Good. Come on up, then. Got a real good feeding going on. Yeah. They straight. That's the problem. They real straight. I just need more of them.
Huh?
It's pretty wild. I was gonna almost like dental insurance too.
It's, Fourth Estate.
I beg your pardon.
You should have your toxic show. You know what you trash. No. Help it to be.
Hmm?
I wanted to sit where you're sitting. Took my seat. I've always sat in that seat. Is that right? You're not gonna, you can't placate them. You're just about the only one that can. You're about the only one that can. Exactly. So you just spent the whole day away from us.
Hmm?
Runs like a Swiss clock in your way.
All right, if we could resume. I have 2:30.
Oh, there was.
Jerry Gonzalez. And I'll just say, as he comes up, nobody else has signed to speak up, so if you wish to speak, please go sign up outside that door. The other sign right there. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Committee members, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jerry Gonzalez. I am with the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, an organization dedicated towards increasing the civic engagement and leadership development of the Latino community all across this great state of Georgia. We were very active in the 2010 census to ensure that the Latino community participated in the 2010 census and the immigrant population as well. Because of our efforts, we think we were successful in getting an additional congressional seat. In fact, the Latino population grew from 435,000 to 854,000, an increase of about 96%. In fact, the Latino population accounted for 28% of the state's total population growth. Let me repeat that because that is very important in this process. The Latino population accounted for 28% of the state's total population growth. The size of the population is approximately about 10%, accounting for 28% of that growth. We are looking at areas, particularly in the Gainesville, Dalton, Chamblee, Doraville, Gwinnett, and Cobb County areas, specifically where there are significant Latino concentrations that would merit to be respected during the redistricting process. In fact, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits racial discrimination in the voting process that includes the redistricting process. And the state of Georgia must comply with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We will be watching it closely to ensure that the minority population in the redistricting process, their voting power is not diluted in any way, shape, or form in that process. There is hostility against Latinos in Georgia. With the passage of HB 87 and it becoming law, there has been an increase of anti-Latino, anti-immigrant sentiment and
Speak up, so if you wish to speak, please go sign up outside that door. The other sign right there. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Committee members, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jerry Gonzalez. I am with the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, an organization dedicated towards increasing the civic engagement and leadership development of the Latino community all across this great state of Georgia. We were very active in the 2010 census to ensure that the Latino community participated in the 2010 census and the immigrant population as well. Because of our efforts, we think we were successful in getting an additional congressional seat. In fact, the Latino population grew from 435,000 to 854,000, an increase of about 96%. In fact, the Latino population accounted for 28% of the state's total population growth. Let me repeat that because that is very important in this process. The Latino population accounted for 28% of the state's total population growth. The size of the population is approximately about 10%, accounting for 28% of that growth. We are looking at areas, particularly in the Gainesville, Dalton, Chamblee, Doraville, Gwinnett, and Cobb County areas, specifically where there are significant Latino concentrations that would merit to be respected during the redistricting process. In fact, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits racial discrimination in the voting process that includes the redistricting process. And the state of Georgia must comply with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We will be watching it closely to ensure that the minority population in the redistricting process, their voting power is not diluted in any way, shape, or form in that process. There is hostility against Latinos in Georgia. With the passage of HB 87 and it becoming law, there has been an increase of anti-Latino, anti-immigrant sentiment and bias and actions against the Latino community all across this state. Because of that hostility, we want to make sure that it goes on record that this hostility exists, and it is also represented in some of the elected officials as well. As an example, we are going to be submitting testimony that Senator Renee Unterman gave on the last day of the legislative session in the debate of HB 87. In that speech, Senator Renee Unterman embarrassed herself and embarrassed our state by furthering anti-Latino, anti-immigrant rhetoric on the well. She demonstrates and is a clear example of the anti-Latino hostility that exists in our state. Due to that, we will be working closely with committee members in the redistricting process to ensure that, number one, the Voting Rights Act is respected and is applied fairly. Number two, to ensure that the Latino community's electoral power isn't diminished, compacted, or packed in any way, shape, or form. We look forward to working with committee members on this process. We want to ensure that the Latino community is respected in this process, and we look forward to that collaborative work as we redraw Georgia's lines. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Anybody else signed up? Okay, with that, I would like to go into consideration of the proposal, the guidelines that I sent to the committee members. You should have a copy in your folder entitled 2011-2012 Guidelines for the Senate Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee. Put in parentheses committee because there's reference in here to talk about the committee, and we're talking about the Senate committee with regard to that. Does everybody have a copy? All right, let me try to quickly just kind of go through this. Mr. Leader, I want to go through the proposal, and then at that point in time we can go back with any questions, but for the purpose of the public that is here and being recording, I'd like to go through what the proposals were, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So that we have it in a way that's, is cohesive. And in Roman 1, letter A, we talk about public hearings. Basically, we're going to ensure that as we go through this, we'll have video recordings of the hearings that we have, and they will be posted, and the website is listed there. The public hearings that we had, those public hearings, the 12 public hearings I talked about, those will still be available as we go through this process for people to refer to. Item B, on the committee meetings, basically this is just saying that, number one, that our committee meetings that we have for the purpose of adopting any plan will be open to the public, as we have all of our other committee meetings, and that we will have at least a 24-hour notification of any committee meeting that we have. And then also we will, like any committee meeting we have, we will retain minutes of that. Roman 2, we're talking about the public access to redistricting and data materials. We have a lot of information, and there's numerous questions about that data. That we have that data, and if anybody wants to access that data, that they can, but it will be at a certain retrievable cost. As I understand, the Reapportionment Office has a list of what those costs would be if anyone has any questions about that. We have stated in here for clarity on number C, and you'll see it later on in talk about confidentiality. I want to be very clear that if any senator goes and works and accesses any of that information for the purpose of drawing any kind of plan, and that information will be held confidential in that member's file until they have made it public. If they make it public, then anybody can go and could retrieve certain data information on that plan once they make it public. Roman 3 are the redistricting general principles, and this is probably where we'll spend most of the time, the discussion that we'll have today. If we have any discussion. And I will try to go through those real quickly of what we've listed as the general principles. Number 1, each congressional district shall be drawn with a total population of plus or minus 1 person from the ideal district size. Number 2, each legislative district of the General Assembly shall be drawn to achieve a total population that is substantially equal as practicable, considering the principles listed below. Number 3, all plans adopted by the committee will comply with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended. Number 4, all plans adopted by the committee will comply with the United States and the Georgia constitutions. Number 5, districts shall be composed of contiguous geography. Districts that connect on a single point are not contiguous. Number 6, no multi-member district shall be drawn on any legislative redistricting plan. I'll make a note, as I said earlier, we are trying to adopt similar principles with the House. The Georgia Constitution prohibits multi-member districts in the Senate, but that's the reason that that is listed there. Again, so there's one sheet of paper for both chambers for the public to be able to access. Number 7, the committee should consider A, the boundaries of counties and precincts, B, compactness, and C, communities of interest. And number 8, efforts should be made to avoid the unnecessary pairing of incumbents. Number 9, the identifying of these criteria is not intended to limit the consideration of any other principle or factors that the committee deems appropriate. In B, this is plans through the Legislative and Reapportionment Office. This is to list out that basically when the map is made public, then information can be gathered to that. And again, trying to be very clearly that if any member of the Senate and of the House also goes and draws any plan, that is strictly held in confidence. I have been firm with telling the office that I want to make sure that that is protected. So if you go, they don't come tell me that you were there. And but at any point in time, you release a map from a public standpoint, then the public will have an opportunity to go and gather information on that. C deals with plans that are produced outside the office. This is a very, very technically legal matter that we will be dealing with. There is a certain way that we have to make sure that we account for every square inch of the state of Georgia and the population that was identified in the census. This goes through the process of those people who wish to submit plans and how they can go through and do that and get that through the redistricting office and submitted to the committee. There's a lot of technical stuff right there, and I'm sure that everybody on this committee understands every one of those things that's in there. On D, the general guidelines for presentation of all plans. When it comes to the presentation of a map before this committee, only a member of this committee may make a presentation to this committee of a plan. That does not mean that others can't go to someone on this committee to get it presented, but basically members of this committee are the ones that will be making presentations to the committee. That is kind of, in essence, a summary of that, and I'll be more than happy to try to answer any questions, any discussion on those as deemed possible. Are there any questions? Senator Henson.
Yeah, two things. One, earlier we were given an opportunity on Friday to give you a proposal. And you're aware we're going to talk to you about the proposal. I'm just curious if there was, no, you discussed probably some of these guidelines, work them out, we've had discussions. Do you have any other proposals from other senators? Could you give us, a list or tell us who made proposals? We have 11 that we made. We're going to, as I've discussed with you earlier, offer a few of them, try to cut it down. But I certainly, if somebody had other proposals on the committee that aren't incorporated in your plan, I think it would be a positive thing if we could maybe see them. You maybe incorporated them all, besides the ones of ours that were not in the plan. Or you may have not gotten any from any other senators, but kind of want to know the posture and, if you received a bunch of them, if there were any that you were closely considering and maybe opted out of that you want to discuss or anything like that.
I will leave that to each and every individual senator if they wish to disclose in any proposals that they made that they feel is not covered by any of the guidelines that we've put in here.
Thank you, Senator. Second of all, on regards to the
Jared, give him the stand so he doesn't have to hold the microphone.
two gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. No, Mr. Chairman, on the process through the committee, to doing your best to try to protect members from having a work product they can, in us making a decision whether to adopt this principle to protect
I'm sorry, you said
The-
a work product that they've been working on?
in the reapportionment process. You said people could go to the reapportionment
Right.
office, work on something, and that is protected until they submit it to the committee
All right.
from public view. Before we vote to do that, I think it's important that we know what kind of timeline that we're going to engage the public. So can you give us an idea when you think the committee will have a product that will be open for public view, number one? And number two, is that consistent with the law and any Freedom of Information Act, meaning that those items at reapportionment are legally protected, and this recommendation is consistent with law?
I will say that I have been very clear that one of the things that I experienced, and you weren't here, but I experienced that what happened 10 years ago when we had to go through this process is that a final product was unveiled at a committee meeting for the purpose of adopting that plan at that committee meeting. That's the first time the public got to see that map. And I have made the commitment, and I have made the comment many times, that we will unveil a Senate map before we have a committee meeting for the purpose of adopting that map. I have, we have 56 members of the Senate to work through a plan. We haven't even adopted principles yet. Time is getting short, and for us to, the time is getting short for us to be able to do that. But once we adopt the principles and we go through and work that, whenever we have a plan that is ready and we make sure that it is adherence to the principles and to the law, then we will make it public. And I have told you that in conversations that we've had. And that will happen prior to a committee meeting for the purpose of adopting the plan. I think that is much generous and much better than it's been done in the past, because we want to do it better than what was done 10 years ago.
Second part of the question about the Freedom of Open Records Act and the protection of those documents.
Specifically, your question is?
Is there protection in the reapportionment office?
From the open records request? Yes.
Okay. Now, back to your contention, I want to make it clear that we appreciate getting the maps before a committee meeting, but we certainly want to have those maps as soon as possible. And I think the general public would like to have input on those maps as soon as possible. And many statements made by some members in here that were there in the 2000 timeframe, 2001, 2002 reapportionment, reflect that the public and other members should be made a more open process than you experience. So you're, certainly brought these 24 hours ahead of time. It is your intention to make those available as soon as possible, as soon as you, and prior to the session?
Senator, as I said, you have not come to even talk to me about your district yet.
I did. I actually did.
Specifically about your district, no, sir.
Yeah, I talked about Lamar North Precinct and that precinct. We talked about my district. That meeting was set up for that
I don't
purpose.
recall that, but I will say this. Not every member of the Senate has even come talk to me. Let me say that that's the case. Not every member has come and talked to me about their district yet.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to tell you when I can have a map ready for you, I can't tell you that. You have my commitment that we will do it better than what we did it before, and I can't put a time frame on that.
Thanks, Senator.
Any other questions? Senator Tate.
Mr. Chair, in the principles that you provided, you have number C, your plan to use the legislative and reapportionment office.
Which C?
C on page 3 and 4.
Okay.
As you mentioned, there are a lot of things
So this,
involved.
just for clarity, this would be Roman 3C. Okay.
Page 3.
On page 3, that's Roman 3C. Mhm.
Okay, 3C,
Mhm.
plans produced outside of the legislative and congressional reapportionment office.
Mhm.
That's what I'm talking about. As you have already admitted that these are very specific guidelines that have to be used to be able to present a plan, will outside members, because I'm looking at this block ID district and, you know, you got very specific in this, will they be able to access the reapportionment office in any shape, form, or fashion?
Who is an outside member?
No, not a member.
You said outside
People-
member.
Okay. Outside groups
Okay.
that want to present a plan that need to follow what you have in C. Will they have an ability to be able to go and use the reapportionment office to be able to follow the guidelines that you have in C? That I'm concerned about their ability and outside groups' ability to be able to follow all of these 1 through 4 that are found in C.
They will not be able to go to the legislative office and sit down and to do that. They can submit a map, and as these list different things and variations that they come from, I mean, even from standpoint of a handwritten map,
Okay.
to a member of the Senate who can go to the office and then have a map done with the information that we need in order to make a presentation before the committee. They can, if they have Maptitude software, they can go and purchase the data so that they can go and draw their own maps at that point in time. Regardless of anybody that has a proposal, what we're saying is it needs to go through the redistricting office to make sure that we have all the technical areas addressed that we need to. But they need to work through a member of the Senate to do that.
And they would be purchasing the information to go into Maptitude from the redistricting office?
From the redistricting office. They have a schedule of what it would cost to do whatever information they need.
Thank you.
Senator Fort.
That be available, because during the public on the part of the public. It's my understanding that House looking at actual
Senator, you were here 10 years ago, and I can guarantee you that we will have much more openness of working with senators and looking at districts than what happened 10 years ago. That's my answer.
be for those guys. Wouldn't it be possible for us to have a look at something?
Senator, the last thing, we've served together for 11 years, and I hope that you know me, that I'm a person, I do not want to make commitments for things I can't deliver. And the last thing that I want to do is make any commitment in any way that makes any member of this body feel like they aren't getting what they thought they were going to get when they were going to get it. And I can tell you that I am committed. I can tell you that there are many other members of the Senate body that are committed in doing this process in an open and fair manner with every member that wants to participate. There are some that have chosen not to participate up to this point in time. And so I can't tell you because, like I said, I haven't had every member of the Senate come and talk to me about their district. If I had been shopping maps around to individuals before adopting principles, you'd be sitting there criticizing me for having some preconceived notion of what was going to happen and then adopting principles that fit what I wanted to do. I've been very careful in going through and trying to get input from the citizens and the senators. We will adopt principles, and then I will begin that process of putting together. I cannot tell you when that will happen. I'm telling you, I'm making a commitment that we are going to unveil it before we walk into a committee meeting for the purpose of adopting it. I don't know when that date or time will be, but I will make it as soon as we can. But until we get a map, I have nothing to show.
Okay.
Senator Henson.
On the guidelines proposed, you say that you would want the districts as, and quite frankly, this is in and out, but you want the districts as evenly in population as possible. And we had talked previously amongst a group, that we had talked about a plus or minus 1%. The congressional districts have to be within one vote. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean as equal as, I could read the exact language.
As
everybody's got it
practicable, I think
in front of them.
I am very aware, and we are very aware that in reality, we know that with Larios, there's no such thing as a safe harbor, and any deviation has to be justified. And so that is what we will work, that if there is any deviation from what the average for a district should be, then we have to provide justification for what that number will be.
So your expectation is that you will try to be similar to congressional districts, except for when there's justification, splitting, et cetera, precincts or other reasons, and that you still expect it to be within vote. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean as equal as, I could read the exact language.
As
everybody's got it in
practicable, I
front
think
of them.
I am very aware, and we are very aware that in reality, we know that with Larios, there's no such thing as a safe harbor, and any deviation has to be justified. And so that is what we will work, that if there is any deviation from what the average for a district should be, then we have to provide justification for what that number will be.
So your expectation is that you will try to be similar to congressional districts, except for when there's justification, splitting, et cetera, precincts or other reasons, and that you still expect it to be within the 2% previously kind of thrown out there, or?
There was nothing thrown
Plus or
out.
minus.
There was a reference that when the courts drew the maps in 2004, they used plus or minus 1%. That's what the courts used in 2004. And in looking at the law, the case law that goes along with it, I am very aware that the way the courts look at this, that they have provided some deviations to occur, but only when there is a reason to justify why that deviation needed to occur. So I'm very sensitive to that, and we will make sure that any deviations will be justified.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear an emotion on the adoption of the guidelines and principles? I have a motion to adopt the principles. Is there a second? There is a second. Senator Henson.
Move to amend, Mr. Chairman. I gave you earlier an amendment, and I have extra copies if your secretary didn't have time to get them in the folder.
We have the copies within the folder. Okay.
Are they there?
Okay, we'll hand them out.
Okay, I got about 15 of them here if you want. Well, I'll wait.
No. Hand out. Wait. Back up. This amendment's what we talk about. Let's pass out that amendment. Just that one.
Yeah.
Just that one. Not the other ones yet. We don't know that those are going to be offered yet. Senator, for clarification, if you would you please read your amendment so that everyone understands exactly what we're talking about?
Thank you. On the lines, I think they're on page 2, Mr. Chairman. I'm not looking at the base, but they have a list of 9 guidelines. I want to insert one on 9 and move the 9th one to 10. This new guideline would be, in order to fully protect the freedom of speech, no plan shall discriminate against any citizen or group on the basis of political belief, past voting history, or past political expression. As we all know, freedom of speech and, most importantly, the freedom of political expression are the most important principles of our founding fathers and important to all of us. And, Mr. Chairman, I think that this is an important guideline that we need to consider to make sure that we draw a map that doesn't disenfranchise anyone, that allows the protection of free speech as it may be considered in certain of our founding documents. I'd also like the chairman to comment on, this amendment, and also whether or not he feels that the U.S. Constitution creates any protection on the basis of political belief, voting history, or past expression of political voting history and political First Amendment right. Thank you.
Senator, how do you define political belief? Would you give us a definition? You're asking us to adopt amendment. Would you please define for us political belief?
Certainly. In the process of reapportionment, it is commonly utilized voting patterns of how someone voted in the primaries, and that voting pattern within the primary as an expression of their political persuasion or beliefs or expression of their political will. And by using those kind of data sets and also using as a foundation for maps political belief, you can be disenfranchising some people. You can be causing basically a repression of a part of the population's First Amendment rights, and so that would be the concern.
Senator, do we have party affiliation registration?
No, we do not, Senator, but we do have records.
Do we have individuals, do we have closed primaries?
We have the primary. Once you vote in the primary.
Do we have closed primaries?
Closed runoffs.
Do we have closed primaries?
You can cross over in the primary, but you've got to vote in the same party. Closed runoff, it's a limited
no. Senator,
closure.
when you do not have registration based on parties and you do not have closed primaries, would you agree with me that there are many individuals who, from election cycle to election cycle, may vote in different primaries for different reasons?
No, I will not agree. The fact is that the vast percentage of people repeatedly vote in similar party primaries. Plus, certainly you'll agree with me that there's often discussions of political voting history, and when we talk about districts and what their political voting patterns are, and that is based on information gathered from the voting records, how they voted in past primaries, plus the actual results in various elections. But we have that record on primary voting and the expression in the elections.
So when I ask you if individuals voting in different primaries, different legislatures, you said no. So you're telling me if I went and looked at the voting record of every voter, the citizen of the state of Georgia, you will not find those who have voted in a Republican primary in one election cycle and a Democratic primary in another.
I did not say no.
Your amendment says discriminate against any citizen. You're talking about a single citizen on political belief, and I ask you how to determine that. And when you have individuals who choose to vote in different primaries, there's no way in determining what a political belief would be for any citizen.
I believe
I believe that this would cause us to have great legal ramifications in adopting this amendment and in potentially making, or we would not even have a legal map. How would you identify past voting history? Are you talking about individual voters, or are you talking about precinct by precinct basis? I mean, how do you determine past voting in light of the discussion we just had?
The courts can take this and rule that certain aspects of our our maps disenfranchises some people in their expression of free speech. Your concern on any, I think, is misguided, that would not be an obstacle for protection to make sure that we were doing things in a fair way. This is trying to make sure that in the process that we leave partisanship to some extent out of it, and we make sure that the people can express their fair beliefs. I believe it's a fair and legally defensible guideline. I think the guideline will strengthen this committee in the commitment to try to draw fair maps and be inclusive to all kinds of people in the state and all political beliefs and all free expression expressed in their political history. There are certainly, as the Senator knows, various ways to get at areas, groups, communities, voting patterns, and try to disrupt that.
Senator, what is past political expression?
As I've stated 3 times, it would include primary voting patterns, general election results in different campaigns and elections, etc. So I make a motion to adopt this amendment.
Senator's made a motion on his amendment. Is there a second? I have a motion and I second. Any further discussion?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I just do want you to ask you whether or not you think the state or federal constitution offers any protection in free speech, and if you think that has any consideration within the political domain, or these processes of drawing maps or protecting communities.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any other discussion? With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair rules the motion, the amendment did not carry.
On page 2, guideline number.
Hang on, let's get the amendment passed out.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Senator, you can go ahead and read it.
Okay.
So it's been passed to make sure everybody has the amendment that you're.
Sure. It would amend item 3A relating to general 13 respectively, and insert 5, all plans shall avoid the dilution of voting strength on the basis of race, color, and membership in a language minority group. 6, excuse me, sir. 6, all plans shall avoid retrogression in the position of racial minorities. 7, the plan must avoid the overconcentration or packing of racial minorities within districts to ensure that such populations are adequately represented. The plan must enhance the ability of minority populations to it says all the Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended. That principle is very general, and it would probably, in terms of compliance with the Voting Rights Act, we would probably have to depend on the court to explain just what that means. Mine gives more specificity. Important, and it creates for the policy but to avoid that, very honestly, to state very specifically what is important. And, be glad.
Does everybody have a copy of the amendment? Senator, so are you saying that if we fail to adopt your amendment that we'll be free to violate the Voting Rights Act?
No, I don't think that's what I said.
Well, we have not just listed portions of the Voting Rights Act, which you are referring to. We have listed that we have to adhere to the entire Voting Rights Act. in the principle that we stated, and not just specific portions that you have listed. Well, I think it's best that we make our principle that we will adhere to the Voting Rights Act and all of the Voting Rights Act, and not just specific
No,
portions of
and
it.
but I don't think you're correct, Mr. Chair. What this would put us on record is, I mean, but these is for specific items. And so I just disagree with you on that things are mutually exclusive.
Senator, the language we've used in these is the exact same language that was used in the principles that were adopted in 2001. I believe that there is a lot of confusion that would transpire with the adoption of this amendment. There's many things in here that I have difficulty in grasping what you're talking about. For instance, would you explain to me what you mean when you say number 6, when the phrase "in the position of racial minorities"? Would you explain to what that means?
In the position of racial minorities, should continue to have the ability to vote for candidates of their choice. Any dilution of voting strength would lend toward retrogression, which would, in effect, deny minority voters the ability to vote for candidates of their choice.
Violate the Voting Rights Act, and retrogression would be a violation of the Voting Rights Act, and therefore any map that we would pass that would do that would not pass pre-clearance. And we're going to pass legal maps, and that's the reason we put in our principles that we will adhere to all of the Voting Rights Act and not certain sections of it. Amendment before you, was there a second on the amendment? There was a second on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All those opposed, say no. In the opinion of the
Senator Cowser, who sits on this committee as vice chair, introduced a resolution that would have created an independent redistricting commission to take the politics out of this process. The Senate Dems reintroduced this when it failed in that year, this particular year, and of course, as you are aware, it never came to committee for hearing. The time has come to take the politics out of this process and to make sure that the process serves Georgia residents. You asked a question regarding consistency and fairness. The citizens that came before us during the public hearings kept saying that they felt that this process needed to be done in a fair and transparent manner. Their belief of a fair, I believe, as we've already said, is one person, one vote, that communities of interest are maintained, and that we do not do anything that would lead to individuals in this process selecting the people that vote for them versus the people that are voting for the people that are in the positions being the ones to select. And that's what they deemed in the committees or in the public hearings as being fair, that they are allowed to be the ones to choose, which is why they asked to be able to see the maps and to have public comment on that.
I don't know how you determine that, but anyway, we have a motion on the amendment. Is there a second? There is a second. Any further discussion on the amendment? With that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Trying to wait for her to look at me, and we wasted that time. Been requested for a roll call vote. Secretary, will you please call for the purpose of taking a vote?
Senator Calvert, no. Senator Sand. Senator Ford. Yes. Senator Henson. Yes. Senator Judson Hill. No. Senator Jackson. No. Senator Rogers. No. Senator State. Senator Tate.
Yes.
President Pro Tem. Senator
With a quorum, the vote is, the motion does not carry. So, any other amendments? With that, we have a motion before the committee to do pass on the proposed guidelines that were submitted, and we have a second. All those in favor of these guidelines, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Is there a wish for a roll call vote on that?
I will.
Roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Nelson? Yea. Myself is a yes, Mr. Chairman. Senator Chan? Senator Ford? Senator Henson?
No.
Senator Judson Hill?
Yes.
Senator Jackson?
Yes.
Senator Rogers? Yes. Senator Staten? Yes. Senator Tate?
No.
President Pro Tem? Chairman, we do have a quorum, and we're going to be yes and 8, and no, 3.
The Senate now has guidelines by which we will use in the process of putting these maps together. Senator Henson.
A couple things, Mr. Chairman. First of all, just want you to comment. I know that there were reasons for this meeting scheduled with conflict of the House time. Your thoughts on whether or not you're going to try to schedule the meetings at a different time so as not to conflict with people who want to come to both meetings. And also, because of the importance to people of Georgia, I was hoping that we could get back as a committee in a fairly near time to see if anything has progressed as far as maps. So I was hoping possibly you would state a date for the first week of August or sooner to try to get back together as a committee.
You know, one thing I have learned, no matter what you do, there will be those that want to criticize it, and no good deed goes unpunished. If we had decided to have separate meetings between the House and the Senate on different days, there would have been those who criticized the fact that individuals would have had to taken off 2 days from work to come down and to be a part of the process down here. If we had had a meeting 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, the criticism would have been that that citizens would have had to take off an entire day of work to come down here and to be part of the process. Having them at the same time made it more convenient for the citizens of this state to come. And as we did, we allowed people to sign up to speak. We even took a recess to give people the opportunity to come that wanted to speak. We had 2 people that asked to speak. So I don't think that we in any way made it inconvenient for the citizens of Georgia. That's the reason why we did that. As far as future meetings, Senator, I guess you're asking me to predetermine what the process is going to be at a point in time, and when we have a need for us to have a committee meeting, we'll make a notification of when that meeting will happen. Senator Ford.
Mr. Chair, there's been reference in this meeting and other meetings by you and others that what happened 10 years ago. And to be honest with you, as I said earlier, I was not a part of leadership 10 years ago. Some things that were done 10 years ago, Mr. Chair, I did not like, and I voted accordingly. And so, I mean, it seems to me that we're almost at the point of kind of schoolyard kind of approach to this stuff. The fact of the matter is, 2 wrongs don't make it right. And I hope that what happened 10 years ago, the references to it, will not color what we do in this very important process as we move forward. But I just felt to say that much, Mr. Chair. I was a little bit angry 10 years ago when some things happened. But, we have been given the charge, constitutionally and otherwise, to do the right thing by the people of Georgia in 2011.
And Senator, I'm committed to, and the comments I've made in doing that we would learn from what happened 10 years ago and that we do not repeat it. And I am not alone amongst those in the Senate that do not want to go down that road. And I believe that I have exercised an enormous amount of having my door open and trying to be having input, and yet there's still been members of the Senate and members of this committee who have told outright lies about this process being closed when in fact it's been more open than any process before. And I will continue to operate that way, and I will continue to operate in extending good faith measures in trying to do this in a way where we as the Senate will work together. I appreciate the meeting I've had with the minority leader. We got the principles out. We discussed the amendments. He and I had some discussions about that. And I did not in any way prevent the amendments from being offered and having a discussion on that, as we do and have doing the due diligence, and that's how we will operate in doing that. We will have differences of opinion. My wife and I have differences of opinion. I'm told I'm always wrong, but anyway. But with that, we have a process by which we will go through, and we will do it in front of the public, and I stand here and am committed and hope that we all will want at the end of the process that people can sit there and look and say, you know, at least that's the way the process should work, and that is a process that we can be proud of. With that, we're adjourned.